It almost seems as if someone sat down and purposely designed a nationalistic ideology that would be as hard to recognize as nationalism as possible. It's funny, isn't it? The left does what it accuses others of doing. They use what works best, but at the same time, they accuse others of doing so, but not themselves. Sacrifice everything for what you believe! Sounds like something Nike once said, eh? Yet Trump is the evil nationalist? Really? Okay. Anyhow, next. So the next type of nationalism is post-colonial nationalism. Now this is the type of nationalism that often arises in countries that were once colonized. It's usually highly autocratic and is often socialist. It's seen as the agent for the creation of a stable post-colonial territory. Yeah. Let's go look at Africa, see if there's any stable governments going on there. Not too many. Anyhow, countries fighting for or who have achieved independence, they require social unity. This can be provided by a sense of strong national identity. All right. Now, other loyalties or people who do not share that national identity threaten the existence of social unity. It sounds like what you would hear in a communist state, doesn't it? Now, the name post-colonial, by the way, that's very telling. You can see that this type of nationalism was named and written, as far as the definition goes, by an academic. It's funny how the academics seem to miss the fact that he also described America's situation up until us declaring our independence from the British and fighting the British and gaining our independence and becoming essentially a post-colonial nation. However, of course, you're not going to find America listed among those countries who fought off a colonial tyrant, nor will anyone point out what a great nation we became after. Because, you see, that doesn't really suit the narrative of the left. You know, the one where white men were not faced with the same obstacles of the so-called oppressed peoples and nations of the world, whose people all live in third world countries to this very day and have developed very little. And the reason for that is because of evil Whitey and his colonialism. Oh no, we white people never suffered the same inequities. Right, which explains why we're doing so well and they're doing so poorly. We never had to suffer under the yoke of colonialism. Hell no. Yeah, we weren't at one point in time in the same boat as them, but we managed to rise above it, but they didn't. Nah, never happened. Anyhow, next. So the next type of nationalism is romantic nationalism, also known as national romanticism, organic nationalism, or identity nationalism. Now, this is the form of nationalism in which the state derives its political legitimacy as an organic consequence of the unity of those it governs. Interesting. This includes depending on the particular manner of practice, the language, race, culture, religion, and customs. These are the classifications, criterion that could be focused around, the nationalism could be focused around. Race. These are different types of identity, ways you can identify and then focus your nationalism around those. Anybody heard the term identity politics? But the left, we're not nationalists. It's the evil orange man bad Trump that's a nationalist. Yeah. This form of nationalism arose in reaction to dynastic or imperial hegemony, which assessed the legitimacy of the state from the top down, emanating from a monarch or other authority, which justified its existence. Such downward radiating power might ultimately derive from a god or gods. Okay? Among the key themes of Romanticism and its most enduring legacy, the cultural assertions of Romantic nationalism have also been central in post-Enlightenment art and political philosophy, from its earliest stirrings with their focus on the development of national languages and folklore and the spiritual value of local customs and traditions, to the movements that would redraw the map of Europe and lead to calls for self-determination of nationalities. Nationalism was one of the key issues in Romanticism, determining its roles, expressions, and meanings. All right. So maybe you're starting to see how things are not so one-dimensional or as cut and dry as the left makes nationalism appear. Next, civic nationalism. Civic nationalism defines the nation as an association of people with equal and shared political rights and allegiance to similar political procedures. According to the principles of civic nationalism, the nation is not based on common ethnic ancestry. Oh, of course not. But is a political entity whose core is not ethnicity. Yeah, you can't have the ties that bind, right? You gotta have weak ties. They're in no way, shape, or form based on that which actually contributes to and creates cultures. Civic nationhood is a political identity built around shared citizenship within the state. Thus, a civic nation isn't defined by its language or culture. Oh no. Things that actually have meaning and mean something. But by its political institutions and liberal principles. Starting to sound familiar? Which its citizens pledge to uphold. Hey, comrade. How are you, comrade? Commissar. Yeah. Membership in the civic nation is open to anyone who shares these values. Of course. Of course. In theory, a civic nation or state does not aim to promote one culture over another. Yeah, right, because all cultures are equal. German philosopher Jürgen Habermas argued that immigrants to a liberal, democratic state need not assimilate into the host culture, but only need to accept the principles of the country's constitution. As if they're going to do that if they haven't assimilated to begin with, because that constitution is a direct reflection of the culture of those people to begin with. But they don't have to assimilate. So this is the left, right? This is communism. That said, if you look closely at all these different forms and definitions of nationalism, you'll see that for the most part, each one contains something of what is reflected in the aims and beliefs of both the left and the right in the West. And if that's the case, then what's with all this talk of nationalism being just this one thing and always evil? Now, the truth of the matter is that the left, they cannot abide nationalism. They can't stand nationalism, at least for their enemies. Now, they're all for using nationalism for themselves, as you can see from these descriptions. They simply don't want anyone else to do so, and they don't want you to know that they're nationalistic, that they're the ones who are really fervently nationalistic. They know how powerful a tool nationalism is. Absolutely. And they are fervent nationalists. They're just nationalists bent on creating a nation of global proportions focused around equality and so-called progressive principles. Nationalism, by the way, it's a real thing. But I don't see it as much on the right in terms of fervor for the state or a country focused around culture as I do on the left. That's for sure. Now, if we go by the words of social constructivists, heck, America doesn't even have a culture. That said, the type of nationalism Trump is pushing for includes things such as love of culture, love of American ideals such as hard work, equality of opportunity, and a type of individualism which has a certain stand-on-your-own-2 feet feel to it. It's essentially a rejection of collectivism.